So let's dive into a really powerful chapter in the life of a young man named Malcolm Little. This is long before he became Malcolm X, of course. It's a story about a kid trying to figure out who he is, but his whole search gets kind of hijacked and defined by this one single, crushing label: Mascot.
You know, it's almost impossible for us to grasp what a huge deal this was. Joe Louis, they called him the Brown Bomber. He was more than just a boxer. He was this powerful symbol of black strength and just sheer excellence in a world that tried to deny both. So this victory, it sent this shockwave of pride through black communities everywhere. And for a young Malcolm Little, sitting in Lansing, Michigan, it sparked this fire in him to find that same feeling for himself.
So if you're a skinny kid, how do you find your own strength when you're living in the shadow of a giant like Joe Louis? Well, for Malcolm, the answer seemed obvious: the boxing ring. His older brother Philbert was a good boxer, and Malcolm thought, hey, maybe I can be too. It was really his first shot at carving out an identity for himself, to be seen as someone.
Okay, so you can see these two different paths he was on, and what's wild is that they both ended up in the exact same place. His boxing career, well, to put it nicely, it was a total bust. He fought this white kid, Bill Peterson, and got beat so badly, not once, but twice, that he literally hid out because he was so humiliated. At the very same time, his school life was blowing up after this prank involving a thumbtack. So one path was this attempt at glory, the other was just plain rebellion, and both of them led directly to him being sent to a detention home in Mason, Michigan.
Now, his life at this detention home, which was run by this white couple, the Swirlins, it was weird. It was a total paradox, because on one hand, he was getting a level of comfort and even acceptance he had never, ever had before. But hiding right under the surface of all that kindness was this subtle, corrosive thing, a kind of dehumanization that would define this whole part of his life.
I mean, just look at this list for a second. By any normal measure, this kid was thriving, right? He gets his own room for the first time ever, they're telling him he's a hard worker, he's the first kid from the home to go to the local school, and he gets elected class president. He was the poster child for success. And that's exactly what makes the reality of what he was actually feeling, the part nobody could see, so much more devastating.
And there it is. That's the heart of the matter. He wasn't really a person to them. He was a mascot, a pet. They liked him, sure, but they never truly saw him. He's standing right there while they're having these deep, private conversations, but his thoughts, his feelings, his actual humanity, it was like it didn't even exist. He might as well have been a lamp.
And this was the soundtrack to that invisibility. That word may be the most loaded word in the English language, just thrown around all day, every day, like it was nothing. And here's the kicker. It wasn't meant to be hateful. It was just a complete and utter failure to see the human being standing in the room, to realize that he had ears and a soul, and that words like that could cut deep. It's the ultimate erasure.
This one little exchange just nails what he called kindly condescension. I mean, here are these quote-unquote good people who really did like Malcolm, just casually talking about all black people as if they're this one simple-minded thing, right in front of him. It's just a chilling example of how deep racism can be, even in people who truly believe they're doing the right thing.
So, just as Malcolm is getting used to this strange, comfortable cage in Mason, this new person walks into his life, his half-sister, Ella, all the way from Boston. And she didn't just bring a suitcase. She brought a vision of a totally different world, a whole other way of being black in America.
I mean, just stop and think about the impact of that for a second. In a world that was constantly, quietly teaching him that his blackness was something to be quiet about or even ashamed of, Ella was a revelation. She was this commanding presence. She was successful, and she wore her very dark skin like it was a crown. She was the polar opposite of the mascot role he'd been playing.
That summer, he took a trip to visit Ella in Boston, and it completely blew his mind. The contrast was just staggering. In Mason, he was alone, he was hearing slurs, and he was getting praised for knowing his place. But in Boston, he walked into this thriving, energetic black community, a whole black society with its own businesses, its own clubs, its own culture, and its own pride. He felt like he belonged. So when he had to go back to Michigan, well, that comfortable cage suddenly felt a whole lot smaller.
Okay, so this new restlessness he's feeling, it all leads up to the climax of this entire chapter of his life. And it's not some big dramatic fight. It's just a quiet, casual conversation with a teacher that he actually liked, but it was a conversation that would change everything for him, forever.
So the question comes from his English teacher, Mr. Ostroski. And you have to understand, Malcolm liked this guy. He was getting some of his best grades in his class. And remember, Malcolm's popular, he's the class president, he has absolutely no reason to think this conversation is going to go anywhere but great.
And why wouldn't he? To him, a lawyer was someone important, someone who didn't have to do menial jobs like washing dishes. It was a perfectly reasonable ambition for one of the smartest, most popular kids in the whole school.
And there it is. Boom. In one sentence, that invisible wall that he'd been feeling for years suddenly becomes very, very real. Mr. Ostroski, this well-meaning teacher, just laid out the absolute limits of Malcolm's world. All the good grades, all the praise, being class president, none of it mattered.
You know what the truly soul-crushing part was? It wasn't just that his dream was shot down. It was watching as his white classmates, some of them with way worse grades than him, were told they could be teachers, nurses, vets, whatever they wanted. But the advice for him was different. Be a carpenter. Be realistic. The message was loud and clear. Your race, and your race alone, defines your future.
After that conversation, there was no going back. It was a point of no return. Something deep inside him snapped, and it set him on a completely new path. A path that would lead him far away from Mason, Michigan, and toward the man the world would eventually know.
The happy-go-lucky Mascot was just gone. He got quiet. He pulled away. And those casual slurs he used to just let slide, now they hit him like a punch. And his reaction, he didn't even say anything. He would just stop and look at the person who said it. That alone made everyone around him incredibly uncomfortable. He wasn't playing the part they wanted him to play anymore.
And things moved fast after that. The Swerlins could tell he wasn't the same happy kid anymore. He writes a letter to his sister Ella, basically begging to come live with her. And Ella being Ella, she makes it happen. The very same week he finishes the 8th grade, Malcolm Little is on a Greyhound bus heading to Boston, leaving his life as a mascot in the rearview mirror for good.
You know, looking back on it, he saw that moment as this huge fork in the road. He could have stayed. He could have accepted that realistic life they had planned for him, maybe become a carpenter. It's pretty wild to think that one single piece of well-meaning but totally destructive advice is what actually launched him onto the path that would not only change his life, but change history.
And that's really the question that sticks with you, isn't it? Malcolm's story is such a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest walls we face aren't built out of hate. They're built out of low expectations by people who think they're just trying to help, just being realistic. It really makes you wonder, what unseen limits are being put on people right now by words that are meant to be kind,